Good morning, everybody. I wanted to make a instructional video for this project that we're going to be doing because it's a little bit complex. So this is just part one of what we're going to be doing here. For this part of the activity, you need to start brainstorming the idea of a cell is like, and then you need to choose something else. You'll find in this document, a cell is like. I'm going to post a list of ideas in here, like a cell is like a city, a cell is like a car, but it needs to be something that has multiple parts that are each doing a job. Like in a city, there is the town hall, there is the power plant, there is the shopping mall and the grocery stores. There's lots of different parts to it, just like there are lots of little parts in a cell that each do a job. Those little parts are called organelles. So what you are going to do is come up with a big idea. A cell is like a city, or a cell is like a car, or whatever it is. And then you are going to choose 10 of these organelles and say, what are they represented by? For example, maybe you would say, well, the nucleus would be best represented by the town hall. And that's because the nucleus is like a control center for the cell. It makes sure the other parts are all functioning properly. It makes sure that they are doing their jobs. And the town hall in the city makes sure the other departments of the city, the garbage department is functioning, the police department is functioning, the laws are being executed correctly, etc. So in my sheet here, I would say, okay, nucleus represented by town hall. Of course, up here, I'd say a cell is like a city, but nucleus is represented by a town hall. And the reasoning is just what I said, because the nucleus controls what goes on in the cell, and the town hall is making sure that everything is functioning properly in the city. You need to do that for 10 organelles. That is the first part. Once you have that done, you'll need to submit it to me. And starting tomorrow, we're going to work on making a PowerPoint presentation, including pictures and descriptions of all of those things that you chose. Now, in order to do this, you need to understand what those organelles are and what their jobs are. So I have included here a list of each of the organelles that are on that paper and a quick, very basic description of what they do. Okay? So for example, the cell membrane is like a skin that controls what can come in and out of the cell. It actually allows certain things in and certain things out. The nucleus, we said, is like a control center or a brain, makes sure other parts are doing their jobs, etc. And so these descriptions will help you know what the cell part does. And then you would want to think, okay, what is something in a city or in a car or whatever it is that does a similar job, that has a similar task to do? Doesn't have to be exact, but it should be similar, right? Like the town hall being like the nucleus. Now, before I have you do that, let me quickly talk about these different parts that are in that chart, and I will do that using this presentation here once it loads. So I'm going to go through quickly. This is very quick and very brief, but it's going to show you some of these organelles and a quick description of what it is that they do. Again, organelles are the little parts inside of a cell. And those little parts have some jobs to do. So I'm going to group these into 3 categories. The first job is managing and protecting the cell. The second job is providing or getting food for the cell and turning it into usable energy. And the third job has to do with making and moving around these little building blocks called proteins. You've heard of them before. We often talk about how they're in meat. But proteins are little building blocks. They're what the cells, one of the things the cells are actually constructed of, like the little bricks that make up a building. So here's a picture of organelles. Again, each of these little structures is like a little organ. You have organs in your body, a heart, lungs, intestines, and they each have a job to do to keep you alive. Organelles are little structures in the cell that each have a job to do to keep the cell functioning and alive. Very similar. So let's look at job 1, managing and protecting the cell. We're going to include the nucleus, the DNA, the cell membrane, and the cell wall. The nucleus, as we said, is sort of like a brain, not exactly, because a cell doesn't think. But one of the things that your brain does is it sends signals to your lungs to breathe. It sends signals to your heart to pump. You don't have to think about pumping your heart, fortunately. That would be difficult. You'd have to think about it every second of every day. It just does that automatically in the background. It just sends signals to the heart and makes sure the heart is pumping. That's how the nucleus is. It sends signals throughout the cell in different ways and ensures the cell is functioning properly. It houses the DNA. DNA is like a pattern for how to build cells and then how to stick those cells together to make a person or a tree or whatever it is. You can think of this like a blueprint for building a house. It's information of how to put it together. The cell membrane is the skin on the outside of the cell. It's this outer layer here. Now, the cell membrane is all about keeping stuff inside, right? It's the skin that keeps it in, but it also allows certain things to go in and out of the cell. Certain molecules, it will say, oh yeah, come right in. We need that protein, we need that lipid, we need that little piece. And so it will actually pull them through into the inside or push things out. Other things will say, nope, we don't want that in here. And they'll basically just bounce off the cell membrane. That's its job. Allow certain things in and out. I wouldn't say necessarily it really protects the cell much because if something's going to attack it, like a virus would just drill right through it. Okay, but it does control most things coming in and out as the cell needs them. And then you have the cell wall. Not all cells have a cell wall. Plant cells do, for example, but animals don't. This would be like an animal cell. There's no cell wall there. In a plant, there is. There's also a cell membrane. So look at this picture right here. The cell membrane is that pink layer, and this thing they're peeling off is the cell wall. It's a hard, rigid, strong structure. It's like a shell for these plant cells that keeps them sturdy and strong. Okay? It also allows the plant to grow upright because you have bones in your body that allow you to grow upright. You can put your weight on your bones so you can stand up. If you didn't have bones, you'd be a floppy pile of flesh. Plants don't have bones. They have cell walls around the outside that allow them to stack like bricks and stand up their strong, sturdy structures. So that's the first category. Here's a tree. Like I said, those cell walls are like bricks, and you have a skeleton, so it's a little different for you, but that's the cell wall. Job 2. So these organelles, the chloroplasts, the mitochondria, the vacuole, and the lysosome, these have to do with food and energy for the cell. Everything needs energy to survive. Now, plants are really fortunate. They can actually make their own food. They don't eat something. Instead, they have this thing called a chloroplast. They have many of them. You can see in this picture, lots of chloroplasts. These are actually what makes plants green, are the chloroplasts. These little chloroplasts absorb sunlight. They also bring in carbon dioxide, and they bring in water. And they combine those and they rearrange the molecules to make food particles for the plant cells. This process, of course, is called photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, making its own food, happens in the chloroplasts. Now, the mitochondria are also in plant cells because then you got to take that food that's been made and you have to break it apart and use it. You have to actually basically eat it or digest it sort of the same way your stomach would digest the food. That's the mitochondria. So chloroplasts make food and mitochondria eat the food or use the food to make energy out of them. Now, animals, of course, don't have chloroplasts. They don't make their own food, but what they do is they do have mitochondria as well. They bring food from the outside, you eat it, and you are able to then turn that food into usable energy. This is a process called cellular respiration. It's taking the food, you actually react it with oxygen that you breathe, we'll talk more about this later, and you get ATP. This is usable energy for the cell. The vacuole is a storage compartment for storing extra food. This is mostly found in plant cells. They store extra water, extra little food particles for later use in case they need them. You instead have fat cells that store extra food in there, basically. That's what your body fat is. But a large central vacuole is a big storage compartment for a plant cell. And then a lysosome is like a little garbage truck or a little garbage crew. They clean up any waste, get rid of the garbage after breaking down the food. They get it out of the system, like a little garbage crew. Finally, we have job 3. Now, job 3 is all about making and moving around proteins. Again, proteins are like little building blocks. They're the little bricks that would make up the cell, the little pieces that put it together, along with other things. Now, the ribosomes are like a little factory that makes the bricks. It makes the proteins, little protein factories, as you can see here. So they make the proteins, they make the building blocks that will then go to building up the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, it's like a little tubing system that will move those proteins around inside the cell. It moves them from here to over here and to over here, and then it can even push them over here. So short distances, endoplasmic reticulum. So they're made in the ribosomes. They are moved short distances by the endoplasmic reticulum. But sometimes those proteins have to get moved out of the cell or long distances. And so you have this thing called a Golgi complex. The Golgi complex will basically pinch off a piece of itself around a protein. So inside that little bubble there is a little piece of Golgi complex that pinches off right there, becomes a bubble called a vesicle. A vesicle is a little package, basically. So I like to think of the Golgi complex as like the post office. It takes one of those proteins. Oh, we got to ship it somewhere. We got to move it far distance to another cell. It'll package it into a vesicle. That vesicle is allowed to move through the cell membrane, which the little protein probably wouldn't be. And that package is then delivered somewhere else. So the Golgi complex moves the package, makes the package, packages the protein, and moves it long distances. So again, ribosomes make the proteins. Once they're made, if you need to move it a short distance, that's the endoplasmic reticulum. And if you need to package it into a package or a vesicle and ship it a long distance out of the cell, that's the job of the Golgi complex. So those are the cell organelles. Again, here's a list of everything I just talked about. It's right there. And here is the chart you'll fill out. Choose 10. Say, oh, if a cell's like a city, well, this would best represent the nucleus. This would best represent the Golgi complex. Maybe you say the garbage crew or whatever, and give me a good reasoning behind that. And then I will clear that, and then tomorrow we will work on the PowerPoint. I will have further instructions for that. Thank you.